Abducted whilst responding to a distress call, Captain Christopher Pike of the USS Enterprise engages in a battle of wits with captors capable of powerful mental manipulation in Star Trek's original pilot episode, The Cage. Well over 800 episodes, 13 movies spanning nearly 6 decades, it all began right here. Produced in 1964 and sold by Gene Roddenberry as the Wagon Train to the Stars, Star Trek's first episode was soundly rejected by NBC, who told Roddenberry they thought the show was too cerebral, which back then was probably just a nice way to say it didn't finish with a fist fight and didn't even try to sell cigarettes. The studio wasn't completely put off, however, as in an incredibly rare move, Roddenberry was given a second pilot order. That show, Where No Man Has Gone Before, resulted in a full series order for the show, and the rest, as they say, is history. Footage from The Cage was repurposed in Star Trek's first season two-parter, The Menagerie, but the majority of fans around the world didn't get the chance to see the show in its full glory until 1988, over 2 decades following its initial rejection. But what happened? What did I like, and what did I not enjoy so much? Before I get into this breakdown review, please note this video contains spoilers, so if you've not yet seen Star Trek's original pilot, The Cage, this might not be the video for you. Let's warp into this. The Enterprise, under the command of Captain Christopher Pike, is en route to Vega Colony for repairs following a battle on Rigel 7 that left several crewmen injured and 3 dead. The ship intercepts an old radio distress call which the crew locate to the Talos system, where it was sent 18 years prior. With no indication of any survivors and more focused on the welfare of his injured crew, Pike orders the ship to proceed to the Vega Colony. Pike meets with the ship's Dr. Boyce, who is the captain's confidant. Pike admits to Boyce that in light of the recent battle and the loss of crew, he's thinking of resigning from Starfleet, weary of the pressure of safeguarding the lives of over 200 people. Science Officer Spock interrupts with another message received from Talos 4, confirming that there are indeed survivors. Pike returns to the bridge and orders the ship to the planet at time warp factor 7. Before I get into my thoughts on this, as well as future classic episode reviews, I know a lot of this hasn't aged well, from multiple production aspects to some of the things the characters say and do. This is very much a product of its time, and I'm going to treat it as such. I'm going to focus my attention on the effectiveness of the story, its pacing, character motivations, and the actual science fiction stuff, as well as other observations that I just find fun. This episode wastes zero time dropping us into the action. No long-winded title cards or crawls, as was a very popular way of cramming in exposition back then, way before Star Wars made it super famous. We're just thrust straight into the action, with dialogue along the way filling in the gaps as to what this ship and its mission is, and I love that. This kind of chuck you in at the deep end style is great for instant immersion, and it works really well here. As a character, Pike is intriguing almost instantly, in large part thanks to Jeffrey Hunter's performance, which plays things very stoic, but with something clearly bubbling underneath. This is confirmed with a great exchange with Boyce, which is vital to the story, but never comes across as included to force introspection. It actually reminds me a lot of Ben Sisko's introduction in Deep Space Nine, which I think took inspiration from Pike's arc here. The warp visuals were odd, very trippy, which was probably the idea. There's a lot in The Cage that doesn't quite reconcile with what would ultimately become canon. To me, that's totally fine. Like almost every single pilot ever filmed, this was a show that was still figuring itself out practically as the cameras were rolling. Oh, and I also love the brief shot of the couple strolling through the corridors in their civvies. Honestly, who wouldn't want to live in this future with threads like that? Arriving at Talos 4, Pike leads a landing party to the planet's surface, where there they soon encounter a group of aging scientists. Among them is a lone female, a young woman named Vina, who was born around the same time their survey ship crashed 18 years prior. Vina takes an immediate interest in Pike, telling him he is a prime specimen. Elsewhere, 3 talosians, aliens with enlarged pulsating heads, observe the interaction. Vina leads Pike away from the group before vanishing suddenly along with the scientists and their entire camp. The talosians appear and ambush Pike, incapacitating and abducting the captain before escaping into a rocky structure. Spock and the landing party attempt to rescue Pike, blasting at the rocks with their lasers, but their efforts are in vain. Spock contacts the Enterprise, reporting that they have lost the captain. The pacing remains razor sharp and straight to the point. The first act just breezes by in a way a lot of Star Trek to come would struggle to replicate. I also love the reveal of the Talosians with Alexander Courage's musical score and that Dutch angle. The prosthetics to create the large pulsating head still look great, despite the fabrication now looking quite obvious thanks to time and high definition. Pike awakens in a cell, his communicator and weapon having been removed. The Talosians arrive and observe observe their new captive through telepathy, which Pike is able to comprehend. The Talosians want Pike to take an interest in Vina and produce detailed illusions based on the captain's memories. Their first attempt takes Pike back to Rigel 7, where he is forced to protect Vina from a dangerous Kalar warrior. Vina attempts to convince Pike to be more open to the Talosians' illusions, but Pike refuses, telling Vina he's not an animal performing for its supper. Vina also reveals the Talosians are attempting to repopulate their planet after an over-reliance on their mental powers left the surface barren, and that Pike and Vina are considered prime breeding stock. Vina is punished by the Talosians for disclosing this information. The ambition shines through so much of what we're seeing here. This wasn't just a cheap pilot by any means. It cost nearly $500,000 to make back in 1964, which, adjusting for inflation, is about $4.5 million today. To put that into perspective, Game of Thrones, a notoriously expensive show, cost around $6 million per episode to make. Clearly, no expense was being spared to sell the power of the Talosians and their power of illusions, with Pike being transported to a brand new world in a flash. It still looks pretty decent today, and that Rigel 7 matte painting is something I really should buy and hang on my wall at some point. One of the Talosians provides Pike with a vial of liquid for nourishment. Pike refuses to consume the liquid, but relents after he too is punished with an intense mental illusion. Pike continues to disobey, however, startling his captor by unexpectedly charging the cell wall. Through this interaction, Pike discovers the Talosians are unable to read his mind when he is angry or violent. The Talosian confirms what Vina had told Pike previously and promises to continue their efforts to pair the two. The Talosians create an idyllic illusion of Pike's hometown of Mojave, but the captain, wise to the illusion, remains resistant to Vina's attempts to get him to play along. The scenery suddenly changes to a setting Pike isn't familiar with the Talosians now attempting to tempt him with a forbidden fantasy, with Vina now performing as a dancing Orion slave girl. Still, Pike continues to resist Vina and the Talosians. More impressive illusion transitions, including the now super famous appearance of Susan Oliver as the Orion slave girl. Fun fact, when testing the makeup, the crew were confused that test footage was coming back without the green colour. Turns out the people editing hadn't actually been briefed properly and were altering the colour to compensate. Oh, the fun of making film and TV. One minor quibble here: as much as I like Alexander Courage's now iconic music, the levels are a bit loud here, as well as other spots throughout the episode. On the Enterprise, number 1, Spock and crew work to rescue the captain using the ship's power in another failed attempt to blast through the rock. Spock discovers what he believes is the Talosians' power source and prepares another landing party, including Colt, the captain's young new yeoman, as well as number 1. Initiating the transporter beam, Spock looks on as only the females are beamed away, materializing in Pike's cell by the Talosians in a last-ditch effort to provide the captain with a mate. Vina is upset by the arrival of the competition, but number 1 ignores this, telling Pike Vina isn't as young as she appears to be. Unable to locate their abducted crew and seemingly out of options, Spock orders the Enterprise to leave, but the Talosians disable the ship, preventing its departure before scanning its records. Spock fears the ship's usefulness to the Talosians may be nearing an end. Now knowing of their inability to probe his emotional mind, Pike pretends to sleep as a Talosian enters his cell to retrieve the female's weapons. Pike, Colt, and number 1 capture the Talosian, and Pike points a laser at the cell wall and pulls the trigger, which seemingly has no effect. Pike speculates that this is just an illusion and threatens the Talosian, who reveals the laser did in fact blow a hole in the cell wall. Escaping to the planet's surface, the group discover the ship's rescue attempt had also succeeded in blowing the rock wide open. I love the science fiction concept for this episode. What is real is something that we've seen done so many times now that anyone who watches this may not appreciate just how original all this was back in the day. When NBC used the word cerebral to describe the show, this concept is what I always think about first. It's clever, and it gets you thinking about just how deep the Talosians' trickery could go. I kind of wish that there was some additional ambiguity to it all though, kind of like how the likes of Total Recall and Inception messed with us and our ideas of where the fantasy ends and true reality actually begins. The use of emotions to shield Pike's thoughts from the Talosians also made me chuckle, particularly watching in 2022 with Discovery's abundance of feels to resolve its own stories. I'm one of those people that criticises that show for its reliance on emotion, but it's clearly always been an important part of Star Trek. I still maintain it used to be done much better though, as evidenced by what we see here. The Talosian is undeterred, telling Pike the intention was always to get the humans to the planet's surface anyway. Pike offers himself to the Talosians in exchange for the safety of his ship, but number 1 sets her laser to overload, intending to kill herself and the group to prevent the Talosians from achieving achieving their goal. She tells the magistrate it is wrong to create a whole race to live as slaves. The Talosian is joined by others who reveal their findings from the Enterprise's records that humans are too dangerous and are therefore unsuitable for their repopulation program. Resigned to extinction in light of their failure, the Talosians free Pike and the ship. Pike attempts to find a solution, proposing future cooperation with the aliens, but the Talosians refuse, fearing humanity will learn the methods of their powerful mental abilities and will also destroy themselves. It's a real shame Majel Barrett's #1 tested poorly with audiences, as I think she would have made an excellent addition to the show, perhaps with some small behavioural tweaks. I'm glad that we're going to see more of this trailblazing character in Strange New Worlds. The resolution was bold for the time, considering the complete lack of flying fists, but it does come very abruptly with the Talosians just realising humans weren't a good fit. As we learn in future appearances, this race is mentally capable at vast ranges. They knew humans were out there to draw them in the first place. Did they really not think to have a look at their records beforehand? Seems like a bit of an oversight to me. Pike and the landing party prepare to leave, but Vina says she cannot join them. The Talosians lift their illusion, showing Vina's true appearance as badly deformed following the Talosians' attempts to save her following the crash. The Talosians offer to continue to care for Vina, providing her with an illusion of Pike to remain on the planet's surface as a companion for the rest of her life. The revelation of Vina's true form is a highlight of the episode from both a production and storytelling perspective. I love Oliver's delivery of her lines as she tells Pike she can't go with him. You can almost feel her pain in her voice, knowing her time alone seems set to continue. I also like the storytelling choice to cut to the transporter room before switching back for the final reveal. It's a simple tactic used to ramp up intrigue, and it's used to great effect here. Returning to the bridge, Pike tells Dr. Boyes he's refreshed and ready to continue in Starfleet. Yeoman Colt asks Pike who he would have chosen to be his Eve, which the captain brushes aside, ordering the Enterprise to depart on their original heading. They just weren't ready for this, were they? By modern standards, the cage may appear simplistic, but at the time I can fully imagine just how different this was. A story where conflict is resolved not with violence and death, but with diplomacy and compromise instead. What lets the episode down a bit, however, is its campy eroticism, which would become a recurring component of an awful lot of classic Trek, as well as some very stiff acting performances from several who were probably just not sure what they needed to bring to their characters at the time. If you can accept this for what it is, an old sci-fi production featuring a vision of Star Trek that still had a lot to figure out, there's a lot to love about The Cage. A dark but not oppressively grim story tackling fear, regret, isolation and powerlessness, tied together neatly by a genuinely impressive, heady sci-fi concept. I'm giving The Cage 3.5 stars out of 5. What did you think of this episode? Let me know in the comments below, and please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more Star Trek reviews and recaps coming soon. Until next time, I'm the Trek Lad. Live long and prosper.